welcome back to Mark Carney's book club. We are in the last chapter of the book, chapter 16, and on how Canada can build value for all. In this part, we're diving into a discussion on institutions and markets. And so Carney claims that strong institutions and fair and effective markets are the foundations of opportunity for all. And personal note, if he doesn't bring up monopolies hindering fairness in markets, I will be very annoyed. Spoiler, he does. Institutions are humanly devised constraints that structure political, economic, and social interactions. Institutions are critical to market economies, the most fundamental being property rights, and institutions provide a framework for how markets should function. They are meaningless if citizens don't comply. We need to remember that economies built solely on formal institutions and markets, directed by invisible hands without purpose, are like mansions built on the sand. They affect how value is derived, not which values are expressed. They are blind to the forces of inequality as well as to the very real, growing fragilities of our societies. They promise to increase aggregate measured value rather than people's well-being, but they will forfeit both over time because they will undercut the social institutions of the market. Recall that markets are social constructs whose effectiveness is determined partly by the rules of the state and partly by the values of society. If left unattended, they will corrode those values. He's now going to revisit the values discussed so many times throughout this book and bring it into the current chapter in Canada. He claims that we must concentrate on rebuilding social capital to make markets work, and that this is done by individuals and their firms building their sense of responsibility for the whole system. We're now going to go through these core values: solidarity, fairness, responsibility, resilience, sustainability, dynamism, and humility. The first value that we're going to look at is solidarity, and Carney says that solidarity has been at the heart of the effective response to COVID. And while I don't disagree with that at all, I will say that I don't think I've ever seen solidarity in Canadian quite like I have, thanks to the Orange Madman to the south of us. So solidarity, we're going in the right direction there. I definitely believe that. He says, ultimately, solidarity is about people, how to help people acquire new skills so that they have varied and fulfilling careers, how to help people transition into new industries, how to ensure economic change benefits everyone from First Nations to new Canadians from coast to coast to coast. When it comes to transitioning to net zero and the fourth industrial revolution, we need solidarity. He says the tax system should support skilled and fulfilling employment. We cannot keep on subsidizing capital at the expense of labor when we know there is a labor shock coming, meaning that technology is going to disrupt labor. It gives ideas on how businesses should invest money in building the employability of their workers in anticipation of the technological advancements. And I'm obviously pessimistic about that because I see that the decisions are made to just cut people. And that's, companies see tech as not being like, this will make my employees' life easier and I can get them to do other things. They say, no, we're going to cut all these jobs and get tech to do it and have one person just kind of manage everything. And correct me if I'm wrong, let me know these great companies, but I think he's putting too much faith that companies actually care about their employees. No doubt that he did, but you need to focus on how to deploy technologies to upskill existing jobs rather than replace them, and on building skills in anticipation of the jobs of the future. We will end up with a digital by default unless we choose digital by design. We shouldn't view technology through the lens of big tech, where the role of algorithms is to replace humans and interactions should be organized to feed business models centered on big data. So we should start by valuing the outcomes that we want technology to help achieve, such as reducing carbon and improving the returns to labor. He says we need to focus on skills development of junior to mid-level workers. He thinks that all pervasive broadband coverage is a right. Uneven access to broadband during COVID was one of the biggest scandals of inequality, with direct knock-on effects on educational outcomes and job prospects across social strata. In Canada, high-speed broadband access in urban centers is twice the rate in rural areas. In a world where remote working is increasingly possible, the geographic leveling possibilities of the revolution in information and communications technology may finally be realized. Carney believes that there needs to be a radical rethink of education for true lifelong learning. He said it is now widely recognized that early childhood education is critical. This isn't about sending infants to school, but about involving them in their communities and in building communities with people of diverse backgrounds and achievements. The public school system must become the root for social mobility and excellence. Allowing a parallel system for the elites is economically, socially, and morally disastrous. Great public education requires recruiting, training, and regenerating teachers, including giving them sabbaticals. It requires differentiated learning pathways for different strengths of students, but with flexibility so that they can move between cohorts. It will require major investment and constant experimentation. I agree fully with that, and good to see that he doesn't believe in private school for the elites and defunding public education like some parties do and some people do. Since we now live in a world where life expectancy could approach a century, how do we institutionalize retraining in mid-career and integrate it with the social welfare system? And he references quaternary education, meaning after university, and says that the need for vocational training will be paramount. The focus of these policies should be to give everyone the opportunity to thrive. Solidarity is about working together. It is about regeneration more than redistribution. Teaching someone to fish rather than giving them a fish. The test should be that everyone sees their real earnings and prospects grow over their lifetime. An extension of the long period of wage stagnation for huge swaths of people in many societies is neither morally justified nor politically sustainable. This is a high bar, but it is one that companies, communities, governments, and families must all strive to meet. The next values that he's going to go through in this book are fairness and responsibility. Two of the core lessons that I learned as a central banker were the primordial importance that markets are fair and that fairness will endure only if market participants take responsibility. Fairness and responsibility go together in markets, from finance to employment. It is distressingly easy for institutions to develop in ways that undercut fairness. Daron Acemoglu and James Robinson attribute bad institutions in developing nations to colonial rule that put in place structures for the purpose of extracting wealth from the population. To maintain legitimacy, institutions must tend toward the inclusive and away from the extractive. It requires eternal vigilance to ensure they benefit society as a whole and do not fall under the influence of the powerful. It is critical that laws, rules, codes, and conventions are equally applied and are seen to be so. There cannot be one set of rules for insiders and elites and another for the rest. That's why violations of COVID restrictions by those in positions of authority were generally cause for resignations. And it is why a series of inequities and scandals in the financial system that were revealed in the wake of the global financial crisis proved so damaging to the legitimacy of finance and, to some degree, the markets themselves. We're going to wrap up part 3 there. Stay tuned. We're going to continue, finish up fairness and responsibility in part 4, and dive into resilience. Let me know what you think and follow along for more.